The vote. We thought we were stepping into history. Instead, we walked into our own funeral. Earth's skies had barely settled from the afterburn of our first faster-than-light test when they came. Great ships, gilded and geometric, arrived in orbit. Alien and ancient, their hulls bearing the sigils of empires that stretched across the stars. We sent greetings in every language we had. They responded in one, unified compact standard. At first, they seemed like gods. The Galactic Compact, they called themselves a council of 13 civilizations bound by law, diplomacy, and control. Their envoys spoke of inclusion, of galactic peace and integration. They called us a vibrant young species. They offered contact, technology, mentorship. We celebrated. World leaders gathered at the UN in the largest virtual session in history. Entire nations watched as Earth was presented to the Compact. Humanity's dossier read aloud by a three-eyed emissary from the Itari hegemony, her voice like oil over ice. Then, something changed. They began to speak of balance, of risk. Their tone shifted from admiration to assessment. We weren't petitioning for membership. We were being evaluated like cattle. They cited our history, war, ecological destruction, overpopulation. They spoke of our biological efficiency, our high birth rate, our mental adaptability. We were, in their words, aggressively scalable. I remember that phrase because it made my grandfather spit when he told me the story. He was 20 when the vote happened. His name was Aren Rain. The last thing he said to his wife before the broadcast began was, "Maybe we'll finally get off this damn rock." Then the vote came. 13 delegates stood on that galactic dais, beamed in real time to Earth. 13 voices, each one casting judgment. Yeah, yeah, yeah. 11 of them voted for Category V exploitable asset status. Only 2, the Volari Starborn and the Insectal Nur-A, voted against it. Not because they believed in us. No, because they believed we were too dangerous to be enslaved. The broadcast ended with the Compact's verdict, delivered in cold, bureaucratic tone. Earth is hereby annexed under the Labor Reclamation Directive. Human assets to be distributed for optimized extraction. In the weeks that followed, the skies filled again. Not with diplomats this time, but with harvesters. Orbital elevators were dropped like spears into our cities. Automated drones with stunners marched into homes. Children were separated from parents. Doctors, teachers, farmers, engineers, all tagged, sorted, and shipped. The Compact didn't care about your degree or your language. They cared about your stamina and bone density. Earth fell in 40 days. They didn't even bother to bomb us. They didn't need to. We weren't enemies. We were resources. I was born on one of their ships, Chains of Unity. I've never seen Earth except in data fragments, smuggled through the vents by men who called themselves uncles but bore no blood to me. My parents died fixing a coolant manifold for a species that breathes methane and laughs at fire. But I remember the stories. Every enslaved human child did. We didn't forget the vote. We didn't forget how they justified our chains with legal words and diplomatic shrugs. How they looked into our cameras, spoke to our leaders, and smiled while condemning us to servitude. They thought we would break. And for a time we did. We bowed. We bled. We bent our backs and carried their weight. But in our silence, we watched. We listened. We learned. And one day, a new vote was taken. Not in a council chamber, but in the rusted hold of a stolen freighter. 23 human commanders, smugglers, saboteurs, engineers, survivors, sat around a makeshift table made from the broken spine of a Compact drone. The vote was unanimous. War. Not just for survival. Not just for freedom. For vengeance. I stand now aboard the Fury of Earth, a warship built from stolen alien parts and human ingenuity, orbiting a Compact relay station Sunifal. At my side, young recruits watch the screen as I play them the original broadcast, the one that damned us all. Their hands clench into fists. Their jaws tighten. Some whisper curses. Others cry. And when the last delegate's voice rings out, I pause the feed. I look at them, steady. They voted our bones into servitude. Ashes and iron. They shattered our world. But they didn't realize what happens when you press fire to iron. After the vote, After the shackles, the compact worlds learned to speak our name in whispers. Not out of respect, but efficiency. Humans were fast, durable, obedient when threatened. We became the blood in the veins of their empire. We were janitors of spaceports on planets where we couldn't breathe the air. We built reactors we were forbidden to touch once complete. We raised their children, cooked their food, fought their wars as disposable infantry wearing armor too tight to protect us. And still we multiplied. They moved us from world to world like livestock, afraid to let too many of us gather. Afraid we might remember we were a people. We did. They tried to kill our language by banning it. So we spoke in gestures, encoded hums passed along corridors. They banned music, so we carved rhythm into the soles of our feet as we marched under whip and scanner. The compact called us resource efficient. We called each other Ashborn, children of the fallen earth, molded in fire. On Velix 3, a mining station orbiting a molten moon, my father built his rebellion with stolen screws and smuggled dreams. His name was Captain Dane Rain. He once told me, revolution doesn't start with guns. It starts with memory. He used to carry a chip, just a tiny old data shard in his boot. On it was a song from Earth, something ancient. No one knew the words anymore. But the melody traveled system to system, from slave to slave, like a ghost with a message. We are not broken. We are waiting. By the time I was 14, we were already building things they didn't know about. I helped reprogram waste drones into couriers. My friend Mila, age 10, could splice compact firewalls blindfolded. We had no weapons, just rage and time. We used both. I remember the first strike. It wasn't planned. A young worker on Tharnak 7 was beaten to death for drinking water outside designated hours. The next morning, a reactor failed spectacularly. The compact assumed it was human incompetence. They blamed the dead man's friends. Killed 2 more. But then another reactor failed. And another. Within 3 standard months, human-built machinery began malfunctioning across 7 sectors. Compact engineers grew paranoid. Their productivity dropped. Audits began. The fault always traced back to something small. Unnoticed. Ingenious. We never left fingerprints. We left symbols, etched into ventilation grates, scorched into circuit boards. Scalan crossbones bone. Flame. Chain. Broken. The compact noticed, but they didn't understand. They thought they could squash the embers, but they were walking on coals. I earned my stripes in the raid on supply barge 8012K near the frozen rings of Other Prime. We had been tailing it for weeks, me, Mila, and Captain Dane, my father. It carried food, medical supplies, and, more importantly, weapon parts. We struck at 0G, breaking in through the waste vents. 30 humans against 20 compact crew. We had nothing but sharpened tools and redirected oxygen feeds. They had plasma rifles. They died anyway. That night, for the first time in my life, I wore compact armor. It didn't fit quite right. Too rigid. Too clean. I looked in a mirror and didn't see a slave anymore. I saw the beginning of something else. A commander. We broadcast our first message to the bone signal that night. It was my voice. To every Ashborn across the stars, you are not alone. The compact cannot erase what remembers itself. We are steel wrapped in skin. We are Earth's wrath, cold and patient. Let them watch their reactors flicker. Let them fear the sound of their own locks turning. The day will come, and when it does, there will be no mercy. The bone signal spread like a virus, hidden in old maintenance frequencies, slipped into compact entertainment broadcasts as glitches. A phrase started passing from mouth to mouth. Never broken, just buried. We didn't have fleets yet. We didn't have dreadnoughts or coordinated armies. But we had a million hands building, tweaking, sabotaging. We had minds sharpened on cruelty. We had pain, and we learned to shape it into purpose. The compact thought we were a labor species. They didn't see the culture we were forging beneath their boots. They didn't hear the anthem being sung beneath our breath. They didn't know that each time they beat us down, they made us harder, sharper. They didn't realize that we weren't just surviving. We were forging ourselves into iron, into fury, into a people that would rise not just to fight, but to win. the Day of Blood Suns. War is not declared by speeches. It's declared when fire replaces silence. We called it the Day of Blood Suns, not because the stars bled, but because they bore witness to the moment humanity stopped being a resource and became a reckoning. It began with 7 simultaneous attacks across 3 sectors. We struck hard, fast, and without mercy. The compact had grown used to sabotage, small, chaotic acts, isolated and scattered. But they didn't see the pattern. They didn't realize those sparks were the fuse. Until we lit it. I commanded the strike on Velix 3, the same forge world where my father once smuggled his first stolen capacitor. It was poetic, fitting, circular. We didn't drop from orbit. We were already there. For months, human workers, slaves, in the compact's words, had prepared the ground. They mapped patrols, logged guard rotations, mapped every vent shaft, every fuel cell, every blind camera. They waited. And when the bone signal changed from static to rhythm, they moved. The code was simple. Tap, 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 tap. Flame falls. On that signal, across Velix 3, 1,000 hidden weapons emerged. Plasma pistons carved from stolen or fusion knives built in the dark, repurposed industrial cutters. Human workers became soldiers in seconds. Overseers never had the chance to scream. We didn't take prisoners. Why would we? They never took any when they conquered Earth. In orbit, we seized the compact's logistics satellite. Mila, now commander of cyber warfare, personally injected the worm into their comms relay. The compact fleet arrived to silence. No distress calls. No resistance requests. Just black. They found the station empty. Until the human fleet decloaked behind them. I watched from the bridge of Fury of Earth as our retrofitted warships, once fuel haulers and cargo sleds, ripped into the sleek compact dreadnoughts. Their shields, flawless against their enemies, cracked under weapons they didn't understand. Because we built them wrong on purpose. Unpredictably, brutally. One ship, Vigilant Orbit, fell into the gravity well, pulled apart by its own mass. I watched it spiral. A compact commander begged for mercy on an open channel. I answered with silence. On Darak Thal, a jungle world turned slave nursery, another rebellion ignited. Children, barefoot, bone-thin, half-naked, rose with sharpened metal. They trained in secret with wooden sticks, preparing for the day. The moment came, and they became wolves. Their overseers screamed as they were dragged into the trees and never came back. 1 billion humans were freed that day. Children stood on the bodies of their captors, holding up a banner made from the overseers' uniforms. On it, painted in blood and ash, were the words, "You made us tools. We became blades." The Compact Council called us terrorists. Monsters. They issued decrees and deployed extermination fleets. But they couldn't erase what had already awakened. We no longer feared death. We'd been living with it for generations. What we wanted now was justice, and we spoke it in a language the Compact finally understood. Fire. Across the stars, their news feeds flickered with images of Compact officials on their knees. Human insurgents in scavenged armor dragging them through the dirt, making them beg in the tongues they once used to command us. We didn't hide our faces anymore. We sent holos to every slave world. Clips of Kale Rain standing on the crushed statue of a Compact general, armor scorched, eyes unblinking. "You remember the vote," I said to the camera. "We do too. You thought you were ending a threat. You were planting a storm. We weren't just liberating planets. We were converting them into arsenals. Factories once used to build control collars now forge missiles. Food depots once rationed to slaves became supply hubs for armies. Every liberated world became a war machine, humming with the sound of human industry. And beneath it all, a chant grew. Low at first, then louder. Not whispered, not hidden. We do not kneel. We do not break. We are Earth's fire. The Compact began to fracture. Some species turned their backs, retreating to their home systems, terrified we'd come for them next. Others, like the cold-blooded Hiraku, begged for negotiation. We gave them our answer. We sent back the orbital codes of their capital city, with a timer. They had 1 hour to evacuate. 60 minutes later, that sky glowed red. A new sun was born from fire and debris. The bone signal rang out afterward with a single message. Blood paid. Interest remains. That night, I sat alone in the war room of Fury of Earth. Stars blinked outside the viewport, like eyes watching history turn. Mila entered quietly, dropped a datapad in front of me. On it, intercepted compact chatter. They were afraid. They were calling us a name now. The Iron Reclaimers. I looked out at those stars and thought of my grandfather. He once said they voted our bones into servitude. Now, finally, the galaxy understood. We weren't the ones to fear because we were slaves. We were the ones to fear because we never stayed that way. Boots in the dust. Victory is not when they fall. Victory is when they kneel. When the first compact officer kissed the dirt at my feet, begging for mercy, I didn't feel triumph. I felt cold. We had taken Thalion's Reach, the compact's elite military outpost, the one they built on the bones of 1,000 enslaved human workers. The place was a monument to our humiliation. Towering statues of compact generals stood in gold, arms raised in false benevolence, eyes carved to gaze upon the landing pads where our people once arrived in shackles. We made them watch as we tore those statues down. Our boots stomped their symbols into dust. It wasn't just about reclaiming territory anymore. It was about breaking legacy, tearing down every lie they told about us, about our obedience, our place, our weakness. When we landed, they expected us to loot, to burn, to rage like animals. They armed for chaos. But we came in formation. Precise, disciplined, human. Our soldiers, once miners, cooks, mechanics, stood taller than any uniform could explain. Every step forward was deliberate. Every command was measured. Even the way we walked through the halls of their command centers told a story. We are not here to scream. We are here to rule. I remember the look in the eyes of Subcommander Erix, the reptilian war tactician who once oversaw orbital bombardments against rebelling human camps. I found him cowering in his private chamber, surrounded by shattered datapads and scorched maps. His scales were dull with fear. His translator chips sputtered. He looked at me, unarmed, crawling, and said something that has never left me. You were never supposed to learn this fast. That was the moment I realized something deeper than vengeance had taken root. We weren't just turning their weapons against them. We were becoming something they feared more than war. Order, purpose, unity. They thought humans needed structure imposed on us. They never imagined what would happen when we imposed it on ourselves. On Arxii Prime, a diplomatic hub once reserved for the compact elite, we marched our prisoners through their own palaces. We made them watch as human engineers dismantled their systems with surgical precision, rebuilding cities, rewiring infrastructure, restoring water to the slums they let rot. Every act of repair was a deeper kind of punishment. You enslaved us to keep your comfort, one of our engineers told a capture prefect, but you never learned how to build it yourselves. On the 37th day of liberation, we opened the palace gates, not to destroy it, but to use it. We turned it into a tribunal. Every compact official who had signed the Earth Servitude vote was summoned. Some fled. Some died in transit. 8 remained. They were brought forward one by one, not executed, judged, because we were not savages. We were not like them. We wanted the galaxy to see what real justice looked like, not a spectacle, but a reckoning. I stood at the tribunal as Earth's military representative, flanked by Mila and a delegation of former slaves from every corner of the compact. 1 billion people watched as we read the crimes aloud, not screamed but stated, clearly, calmly. One of the delegates, a graying amphibian named Salvin Krill, tried to speak. He stood, trembling, his voice hoarse. We followed the law, he croaked. We voted by process. The directive allowed for. Allowed for what? I interrupted. For Earth to be stripped? For families to be sold across solar systems? For children to grow up breathing poisoned air because your council decided our planet wasn't profitable enough to preserve? They looked down, not out of guilt, out of fear, because for the first time, we were the ones holding the silence. After the trial, some wanted blood. Some wanted to drag those delegates through the streets. But we didn't need to. We sentenced them to service, not slavery. Work. They would clean the same cities they once ruled. They would repair the systems they broke. They would build shelters for the orphans of their decisions. And they would do it under human command. One of them resisted, spat at a young sergeant, and called her a bone-born animal. She made him mop the halls for 2 weeks. Not with machines, with his hands. On the last day, she made him polish her boots. She didn't hit him, didn't raise her voice, just stood there, watching. And when he bent down, cloth in hand, and touched his tongue to the dust, the room went silent. Not out of horror, out of peace. Because that was it. The circle closed. They had voted our bones into servitude. And now, they licked our boots clean of the dust they forced us to crawl through. I didn't stay for the celebrations. I stood alone outside the great palace on Arxii Prime, eyes lifted to the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth still orbited, scarred but free. I whispered to it, "We did it, old girl. We're not just surviving anymore. We're remembered. We're written into the stone now. The empire that burned its own chains." Peace is not the absence of war. Peace is when your children don't have to remember what chains felt like. The war didn't end with a treaty. It ended with a silence no compact world dared to break. We had taken the core systems, crushed the council, freed every known human enclave, and leveled every facility that once ran on our labor. The last compact fleet drifted powerless over the ashes of Ravek Station, broadcasting pleas for surrender into a void that no longer responded. Because we weren't listening. We were building. I stood on the bridge of the fury of Earth. Our flagship, no longer a salvage freighter, but a symbol of what humans became when they stopped asking permission. Around me, silence, heavy and reverent. Not far beyond our viewport hung the first new human-built station in over a century, Unity's Forge. It spun with artificial gravity, lit by a fusion sun we crafted from the remains of a compact reactor. Children ran in the corridors. Laughter, not code words, not warnings, not commands, echoed through its levels. We made it out of titanium, steel, and history. On its central ring, a single inscription: for the bone-bound, for the fire-wrought, for the free. But even in peace, the past whispered. We found survivors on the edge worlds. Forgotten camps, old bunkers where humans had been stored like cargo. Some hadn't seen the sky in decades. Some had forgotten the taste of language. I visited one such world, Gainite 4, and walked among them. Their eyes were wild, hollow with generations of trauma packed into a single breath. I knelt in the red dirt beside a boy no older than 9. He flinched as I reached out. But then, slowly, he touched my hand. Not out of fear, out of hope. It shattered something in me. I had warm blood, issued orders, commanded fleets, and burned palaces. But nothing I had done, not the speeches, not the vengeance, mattered more than this. A boy remembering touch as kindness, not control. We didn't just rebuild worlds. We rewrote civilization. We opened the gates of the Bone Accord, a new interstellar charter authored not in ivory towers, but in burned-out ruins and whispered truths. It wasn't just for humans. We invited every species the Compact had crushed, every world they integrated, every race that had been too afraid to rise. Most accepted, not because we were kind, but because we were just. We weren't trying to flip the pyramid. We were tearing it down. The Compact? It still existed, fragmented, directionless. A name more than a power. Their old generals lived in exile. Their rich tried to buy their way into our new cities. Some were allowed. Most were turned away. Forgiveness wasn't currency. Service was. In time, delegation came to Earth. Not as masters, not as diplomats, as pilgrims. They walked through the ruins of New Jakarta, where glass still glittered in the soil from the orbital strikes. They stood beneath the regrown trees of the Pacific wastes and watched human children play in forests reborn from ash. One asked me a question. Why didn't you erase us? I looked at him, wrinkled, scale the last of his line. You voted to erase us first. He nodded, quietly, then bowed. Not performative, not rehearsed, real. That was the moment I realized we had done the impossible. Not just survived oppression. not just overthrown it. We had replaced it with something stronger. Not an empire, a community, built on memory, not control. Mila came to see me one night, gray streaking her hair now, but her eyes just as sharp. We sat under the stars of Arcturus II, watching the night sky dance with auroras summoned by orbital shields. There were no guards, no banners, no broadcasts, just silence. "Do you ever feel it?" she asked. "Like something's still waiting." "Always," I said. "But that's how we survive. By listening." She handed me a small metal box, scarred, old. My father's data shard, the one that had carried Earth's last song. "Found it in storage," she said. "You should play it." I did. The music was damaged, warped by time, but the notes still rose like ghosts. Faint, defiant, a melody from a world they thought they erased. I closed my eyes and saw them again. The slaves, the fighters, the builders, the mourners. The people who carried fire in their teeth and steel in their breath. The ones who refused to forget. We are no longer the Ashborn. We are no longer the Bonebound. We are the Firekeepers. And this galaxy will never again decide our worth with a vote. Let history remember. They took our names. They stole our homes. They voted our bones into servitude. And now they lick our boots. Not because we made them, because they finally understand. We were never beneath them. We were just waiting to rise.